In the 3rd year of marriage. The beautiful little bird raised by my husband outside appeared in front of me. When the young girl saw me, she was panic-stricken, like a little princess in a fairy tale, who knows nothing about the world. I took a sip of soup and calmly invited her out. Upstairs. Solomon strolled unhurriedly while leaning on the railing. When his eyes met mine, he smiled nonchalantly. Luna, perhaps you should try it too. Young and beautiful people are indeed different. I know he is just teasing. I know that he has always loved to trample on others' dignity under his feet. So I just bowed my head and smiled. Solomon doesn't know that I play even bigger than him. As soon as I start flirting, it's with the crown prince of the Beijing circle. When I returned from socializing, the sound of a spatula gliding came from the kitchen. The light in the bedroom on the 2nd floor was still on. Solomon and I have been married for 3 years. He has never entered the kitchen. At midnight, the nanny has already gone home. My footsteps paused. I walked towards the kitchen. When I saw the busy girl inside, I was not surprised. Only when I got closer could I smell the aroma of hangover soup. In her early 20s. The girl is as beautiful as a magnolia. The nightgown on her body didn't fit well. The hem almost touched the ground, and the apron around her waist wasn't tied properly. Perhaps hearing someone coming, she called out with a smile. Solomon, help me tie my apron. I obligingly stepped forward and tied a bow with the hanging ribbon. She smiled and turned around. Didn't I tell you to rest? The unfinished words were swallowed in her throat. The porcelain spoon fell on the marble floor, and small fragments brushed past my feet. The young girl's face turned pale. She stammered and called me. Luna. Miss Luna. My gaze fell on her neck and shoulders. A series of red marks showed what a good mood my husband had just been in. I smiled and asked peacefully. For the hangover soup. Can you share some with me? I can't quite remember when my marriage with Solomon started to deteriorate. I only remember that the first woman who came to find me was his former secretary. She showed up unexpectedly. As soon as I opened the door, I saw 2 people intertwined on the sofa that Solomon and I had chosen together. When she saw me looking over, she pretended to be surprised and ran away. Her acting was so bad that if she were thrown into the entertainment industry, she would be hidden away for 50 years. I knew that Solomon was so drunk that day that he was unconscious. I also knew that she just wanted to take a big gamble while he was drunk. So later when she was fired by Solomon, I wasn't surprised. I have always had a good memory. At a glance, I recognized the girl opposite as Blair. Someone I met 4 months ago. That day when I drove to Solomon's company. In the pouring rain, Solomon picked her up by the waist. The subordinate beside him held an umbrella for them. I watched Solomon put her safely in the car. That scene was as beautiful as an idle drama. I took a sip of the hangover soup in the bowl and looked infuriately at the person standing by the table. Blair lowered her eyes. Her hands clasped together, and her fingertips were so forceful that they turned a little white. I spoke to chase her away. It's getting late. She was like a frightened rabbit, and suddenly looked up. I'll leave now. Miss Luna. Obedient, sensible, and knowing the current situation. No wonder Solomon kept her by his side for so long. She didn't say that she wanted to go up and take another look at Solomon. Nor did she say that she wanted to change into another set of clothes. She just obediently took her phone and walked towards the door. Halfway there, she suddenly turned back. Miss Luna. For the hangover soup. Please remind Solomon to drink it. Otherwise, when he wakes up tomorrow morning, his head will hurt again. I nodded and agreed. The moment the door was closed, the person in the bedroom slowly came out. Solomon's pajamas were loose and sagging. Most of the buttons were undone, revealing the beautiful muscle lines inside. I took a look and infuriately shifted my gaze away. You heard it. So I don't need to remind you. He responded and went downstairs while leaning on the railing. I haven't seen Solomon completely exposed for a long time. There have always been beautiful women around him. I haven't had a turn even after a whole round. The relationship between husband and wife is on the verge of collapse. Luna. He called my name in a low voice. His voice was gentle. I looked up. He looked at me and smiled. Perhaps you should try it too. Young people are always different. 3. I looked at his calm face and vaguely remembered the day of our wedding. Everyone had smiles on their faces and congratulated us on growing old together. Only my friend was expressionless the whole time when she was arranging my skirt in the dressing room. At the moment when the staff invited me to enter, she reached out and tucked a strand of hair by my cheek. Luna, she said softly. Welcome to the quagmire. Marriages in wealthy families are more like exchanges of interests. My marriage with Solomon on the surface is more like a commodity on display in a shop window. Passersby will admire it as a perfect match. But no one thinks about what kind of inferior materials the black-hearted merchant has used under the exquisite appearance. Under the cover of money and power. True feelings seem so unremarkable. I just didn't expect that it would be my husband who would persuade me to cheat. For the phone placed on the table vibrated. I looked down and saw a message sent to me by the young man. Solomon sat down opposite me. I got up and wiped my mouth with a tissue. I have something to do. I'm going out for a while. He responded faintly. There were not many cars in the middle of the night. I drove all the way to the location Howard sent me without any obstructions. There were still quite a few cars in front of the bar. 4 or 5 young people were gathered together, not knowing what they were talking about. I spotted Howard standing under the street lamp at a glance. The young man had a tall and slender figure, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. The white light falling on his head made his face a bit blurry, but it was still stunningly beautiful at a glance. I parked my car by the side of the road, got out and walked over to call him. Howard. He looked up. Before he could speak, a girl suddenly rushed out from behind him and stood between us. The strong smell of alcohol made me frown. The girl stretched out her hand and pushed me hard with great strength. Her tone was unyielding. Hey. Where are you from? At such an old age. Are you still hitting on a kid? I am only 25 this year. It's just that after staying in the Vanity Fair for a long time, it's inevitable to be tainted with some adult cunning. There is a clear distinction between me and students who haven't entered society. She looked me up and down and said in a contemptuous tone, You don't think Howard will like an old woman like you? Do you? I raised my eyebrows. Before I could speak, the person behind me grabbed her wrist first. The girl felt pain. 7 points of drunkenness sobered up to 3 points. Howard. She is my senior sister. Howard's voice was a bit chilly at night. The girl was stunned for a moment. Then she immediately lowered her head and apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't. I don't need you to interfere in my social circle. Classmate Xiao. We are not that familiar to this extent. He let go and said inferently, Perhaps you still need to find a teacher to teach you what courtesy is again. The girl's face instantly turned pale. I could almost hear the sound of a young girl's heart cracking. TSK. So pitiful. 5. I also met Howard in a bar. For the first time. The scandal surrounding Solomon backfired and fell on the two of us. The company's stock price was innocently affected. I still had to worry about handling his public relations. Under the feeling of boredom and frustration, I came to the bar alone for entertainment. The front desk was bustling with people. The bartender teased me with a smile. Maybe a Prince Charming will descend from the sky and save you from the fire and water. I didn't deny it. I got up and went to the toilet. When I came out, I happened to run into a confession scene in the corridor. Amidst the deafening music, I heard the girl at the corner shout with the loudest voice in her life, I like you very much. Can you let me be your girlfriend? I couldn't hear clearly what the young man said. I poked my head out to watch the gossip, but I saw the girl run away with her head down. The moment the young man turned around, I saw his face clearly. Howard. The prince of the Beijing circle who was born with the purest golden spoon in this world. As a businessman, my thinking was so keen that I made a decision in an instant. I stepped forward and gently patted his shoulder. Master, I am different from those women. I am a married woman. The prince was shocked. 6. The Prince Charming who descends from the sky can not only save Cinderella, he can also heal the tattered heart of a young woman. After all, if I can cooperate with Howard's family, getting orders worth hundreds of millions will be a piece of cake. Pleasing the prince is much easier than pleasing those shrewd old foxes in the business world. After graduating for many years, I have the nerve used my teacher's connections and cared for the prince under the guise of being a senior sister and junior brother. When I was young, pleasing girls was my forte. Whether it was sisters, aunts, female teachers, or any gentlewoman, they were always especially easy to soften their hearts. But Howard was invulnerable. He accurately blocked every temptation of mine and put all my kindness under the high-sounding definition as senior sister and junior brother. Just like today, out of care for my junior brother, I came to the bar to pick up the drunk him. 7. When I started the car, Howard had already sat in the passenger seat. Thank you for your trouble. Today I leaned sideways, reached out and pulled open the seat belt above, and bent down to fasten it for him. His breathing paused. He held his breath a little and didn't speak anymore. I could almost smell the faint smell of alcohol on him. Looking up, I met his eyes. Our noses were almost touching. I teased him. Why don't you speak? Howard was on the verge of exploding. Immediately, he reached out and pushed me away. Too close. The prince's ears turned red, like a fluffy ragdoll cat in winter. Luna, can you talk properly? I leaned back on the driver's seat, put my hand on the steering wheel and replied seriously. You stood up for this old woman. I have nothing to repay you. I can only repay you with my body. Luna. The ragdoll cat exploded. I responded calmly. What's your order? Master? The prince frowned. The prince shut up. The prince was unhappy. After a long time, I finally heard him utter a sentence. You are not old. Do I still have to repay you with my body? The person in the passenger seat didn't reply for a long time, taking advantage of the few seconds when the red light stopped. I glanced at Howard. The young man propped his face with his hand, half closed his eyes, and his gaze fell on my hand. The diamond ring on the ring finger reflects a brilliant light. An obvious wedding ring. Solomon's one has long been lost and I don't know where it is. But I still wear it all the time. Most people in the circle don't like to wear wedding rings very much. Love and loyalty seem to have nothing to do with their nominal marriages. So I am naturally regarded as an oddity. At first, they laughed that Solomon might become the next henpecked husband. But I never made a fuss. So later they envied again and said that Solomon was very lucky to meet a wife who loves him so much. Loving so deeply that even the wild flowers outside are tolerated. At the second when the traffic light turns from yellow to green, I heard Howard's calm voice. I don't talk to married women. 8. The next day, I met my good friend Yvonne at the auction. She looked at the dark circles under my eyes and was merciless. Finally. You are willing to look for someone? Still? You should pay attention to your health. No. I went out to be a driver for someone in the middle of the night. Yvonne looked me up and down twice and said thoughtfully. Why do I think? The crown prince's level is quite high. I remained non-committal. I took a fancy to the ruby necklace at today's auction and planned to take a picture of it. Then it could be delivered to Mrs. Howard tomorrow. Being sociable and catering to others' interests is a required course for every qualified businessman. I am only here for it today. The staff on the stage brought up the last treasure. That intricate and exquisite necklace is shining and dazzling under the light. I was not in the mood to listen to his introduction. After the starting price was announced, I immediately raised my sign and made an offer. The auctioneer read out my offer. Someone in the venue immediately raised the price, inching up. 3 million. 3,200,000. 3,500,000. I thought for a moment and raised my sign again. 3,800,000. No one answered. Is there anyone else who wants to raise the price? The auctioneer said, 3,800,000 for the first time. 3,800,000 for the second. 4 million. Someone suddenly spoke up and interrupted him. I subconsciously looked in the direction of the sound. Solomon was sitting there. The sign in his hand was not put down. With his other hand, he put his arm around the girl beside him and looked at me with a smile. When Blair saw me looking over, she was a little frightened and shrank back into Solomon's arms. I withdrew my gaze. 4,200,000. 4,300,000. 4,400,000. 4,500,000. Solomon seemed to be competing with me and kept raising the price. The people in the venue looked down and minded their own business, quietly watching the drama of a wealthy couple breaking up. I had a headache. I got up and went to Solomon. I remember you don't have the hobby of collecting jewelry. He curved his lips. I just suddenly think that necklace matches Blair very well. I looked at Blair. She met my eyes, bit her lower lip, and her eyes were a little red. Miss Luna, that necklace is very beautiful. Solomon shrugged, and his peach blossom eyes slightly rose. I withdrew my gaze. The calmness I had maintained for many years was almost on the verge of collapse at this moment. Solomon loves to watch women fight. Especially loves to see me lose my composure. The women around him are endless, and the means of provoking me are various. The only time I lost my composure was 2 years ago when I slapped that person with my own hand. I can't remember her appearance very clearly. I only remember that Solomon was very happy when he saw me angry that day. He put his hand on mine that had hit someone and gently stroked it twice. His tone was doting. Luna, if she makes you unhappy, just tell me. There's no need to dirty your hand. 9. I didn't speak anymore and got up and walked out. The auctioneer in the venue finalized the deal and determined the destination of that necklace. I stood at the door and watched the staff guide Solomon and Blair to pay for the necklace. At the moment when Solomon handed out his card, I suddenly felt in a good mood. I lowered my head and sent a message to the note. AAA Prince of the Beijing Circle. Brother Howard, where are you? Howard replied quickly. Laboratory. I looked at the time and thought for a while. Didn't you have dinner again? The typing in the chat box changed for a long time, but no complete message was sent. So I took the initiative to send another message. Zhao's private cuisine. Wait for me. I'll be at the school gate in about 40 minutes. When I put away my phone, Yvonne looked at me. Are you delivering takeout for the prince today? I nodded. She wanted to say something but stopped. I smiled. Yvonne, I said. I am a businessman. 10. The time was just right for me. Howard was standing at the school gate. Properly. Like a sentry on guard. There is a kind of cute dullness. I drove the car up to him, rolled down the window, and handed him the things on the passenger seat. Howard murmured his thanks. I raised my eyes. Just as I was about to tease him, I saw two familiar figures not far away. The world is really small. A little white flower my husband keeps turns out to be a top student. The necklace that Solomon just bought has already been worn around Blair's neck. Under the night, its beauty is still unstoppable. Jewelry exists to set off people. The young girl is too immature to hold up such gorgeous jewelry. Instead, she has become an accessory to the necklace. My idiot husband. In her early 20s. In the prime of her life. She doesn't need any embellishment and is already stunningly beautiful. Howard looked over in the direction I was looking. Solomon had his back to us, so only Blair's appearance could be seen. She is very beautiful. I withdrew my gaze and looked at Howard with interest. He turned his head, met my gaze, and his eyebrow twitched. My husband likes this type very much. I looked at Howard. I don't like this type. Howard blurted it out almost immediately. The two sentences collided in my dread. I was stunned for a second or two, and then laughed mischievously. The crown prince's face flushed instantly, and he covered his face with his free hand. I became interested. Then what type do you like? Howard's skin is extremely thin, like a snow-charming woman filled with too much strawberry jam, making people want to pinch it. Young master? Luna. He took a breath. The redness on his ear hadn't faded yet. He put down his hand and looked at me. What do you mean by your husband likes this type? Defining one's own type is somewhat difficult. But obviously, I and Blair are definitely not the same type. Liking Blair's type. What else could it mean? I didn't answer him. I just waved my hand with a smile. Go and eat. It's getting late. Howard frowned as if he was a little unhappy. After a while, he just sighed. Are you free next Friday? Why? I became interested again. Young master, are you ready to take the first step in a forbidden love? Luna. He gritted his teeth and called my name. His ears flushed. Just want to thank you for your care and invite you to a meal. Just the two of us? Yes. Food and sex are the great desires of human beings. Eating alone with a man and a woman. Little master, you have impure thoughts. I reached out to pinch Howard's face. He couldn't avoid it in time and was poked in the dimple by me. He jumped away as if burned. So reckless, like a child. If you're not free, then forget it. Howard looked away from me. His tone awkward. Of course I'm free. I smiled. See you on Friday. 11. I thought Blair would come to me. I didn't expect her to come so quickly. When the text message was sent to my phone, I was processing documents. After receiving the message, I pushed the document to Asher. I'll be back in about half an hour. You preside over the first 5 minutes of the meeting. She nodded and agreed. I went downstairs, drove to the coffee shop chosen by Blair, which was not far from Solomon's company. When she saw me, she immediately stood up. Miss Luna. I nodded. She smiled. I remember you don't like coffee. So I ordered fruit tea for you. Is that okay? I nodded. You said you had something to tell me. What is it? Blair looked at me. Her eyes gradually reddened. Then she lowered her head and touched her flat lower abdomen. Miss Luna. I'm pregnant. I didn't have a father since I was a child, and grew up in a single-parent family. I know that if a child doesn't have a father, her growth will be much more difficult than others. Miss Luna. I hope that my child can have a complete family. I took a sip of fruit tea. I remember Solomon has always been very careful with contraception. Having no illegitimate children is also a major reason why I have tolerated him until now. Blair's tears fell on the table one by one, like stars in the sky. It's me. I didn't take the medicine that day. Miss Luna. She looked up at me. A beauty in tears is so heartrending to look at. It's my fault. I really love him so much. Miss Luna. In this life, I will only love Solomon. I always thought Solomon was stupid. And the woman he keeps outside is also stupid. Just when I started to find Blair more pleasing to the eye, I realized that she is still a fool. I watched her cry coldly and glanced at the time. I felt that it could end earlier than half an hour. Miss Blair. I called her calmly. Do you know why I came to see you today? She was stunned for a moment. Her eyes were red, like the jade rabbit in the sky. Extremely pitiful. My time is very precious. Originally, I didn't want to get involved in Solomon's love debts. In the past, there were many people who sent me messages. I treated them all as junk messages. But you are different. You are very beautiful. I rarely praise others' appearances. But she is indeed a rare beauty. So beautiful that I am willing to spare half an hour for her. After all, a beauty is always pleasing to the eye. I took out a piece of paper, got up, put it on her face, and gently wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. Please, with your face, make Solomon divorce me. Okay? 12. The day Howard came to pick me up, he drove by himself. I looked at it several times outside and was instantly overwhelmed. I'll fight with you rich people. Calculating with people in the business field every day is still not as good as the young master who has everything as soon as he is born. Howard was a little amused. Don't you calculate yourself? I hesitated for a moment. Can I sit in the front passenger seat? Will sitting in the back make you look like my driver? Sit in the front passenger seat. When I was young, I heard people say that people will eventually grow into the people they hate the most. I spoke first. Howard replied to me while driving. Then what kind of people do you hate? The rich. The restaurant booked by the young master is very atmospheric. We sat down by the window and chatted casually. In the middle of the meal, a waiter pushed a trolley over. There was an unbaked cake on the trolley. I looked up in surprise. The young man met my eyes and smiled. Happy birthday. I don't know what to give you, so I just invite you to have a meal. I smiled. I know that people in the circle are all shrewd. And I also know that Howard's special status means that he must be very scheming. He may not fail to see my ulterior motives. The best way to bring two strangers of different genders closer is an ambiguous relationship that is ambiguous. But Howard can always step on the edge of that red line when being close, neither advancing nor retreating. It's not that he doesn't know what to give. It's just that compared to a gift that can exist for a long time, a meal can put our relationship in the right position. But why? If you hate someone, you can stay away. The identity of the young master means that there are very few people in this circle who can restrain him. I took a bite of the cake. Before I could speak, the lights in the restaurant suddenly flashed. The piano music in the center also became extremely romantic. Several waiters were holding flowers and pushing out a big cake with two lifelike little people inserted on it. I rested my chin on my hand and heard the waiters saying words like commemorating happiness, being happy, and loving each other until old age to the couple at the next table. It was very grand. I sighed. So happy. Howard looked over and his expression was a little complicated. Your husband, maybe, at home, has also prepared, such a surprise for you. He spoke in a stuttering way. I looked at him and smiled. Howard met my eyes. After a long time, he lowered his eyes as if avoiding. You really aren't curious about me. I teased him. I reached out and held his chin and pointed it towards the happy couple. One is Blair, whom he has seen. The other, well, my husband is right there. 13 at the moment. Howard got up. The wine glass on the table was almost knocked over by him. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. The young man's movement paused. He looked down and met my smiling eyes. The anger on his face softened by 3 points. For the first time, the lose one's composure young master didn't shake off my hand like avoiding the plague as before. I rested my chin on my hand and looked at him and smiled. Do you want to have a drink with me? 14, when I sent Howard to the hotel. In fact, I didn't drink much, and neither did he. But at the moment I was about to say goodbye, I suddenly heard him ask, Luna, the first day we met, that day, you went to the bar because of him, right? Howard was sitting on a chair, looking up and making eye contact with me without dodging. The cold white skin was flushed pink by the alcohol, but those eyes were like a night full of stars, extremely bright. Since the day I met Howard, he seems to have been rejecting others all the time. Indifferent. Noble. A child of a high-ranking family influenced by good family traditions. Only when facing me, occasionally a few traces of youthfulness would be revealed. Perhaps it's because the night is so beautiful. Or perhaps it's because the alcohol is intoxicating. Everything is telling me, now is the perfect time for heart-to-heart talks. I took a step forward and reached out. Howard didn't dodge. I smiled. My marriage is very unsuccessful. In fact, I've always known that he has someone outside. As long as it doesn't come to me, I always let him be. Everyone laughs at me for being stupid. He plays so wildly outside. And I still insist on wearing our wedding ring alone. The day I met you in the bar, the news of him going on vacation with someone else was released. Clearly it was his birthday. I was still stupidly thinking of waiting for him to come back and celebrate his birthday together. Unexpectedly, he already has someone to celebrate. I was very sad that day. After drinking too much, I thought, then why can't I? I looked at Howard, and suddenly my vision became a little blurry. The moonlight is quiet. Such a good atmosphere has the magic to turn lies into truth. Why am I the only one holding on? I stroked Howard's face. He was stunned for a moment. Luna, I said, and then I saw you. You are so special. You are different from everyone I know. You give me a sense of alienation. A very lonely feeling. Being close yet distant. I've heard many people say that they are lonely. But I think your loneliness is the real loneliness. I feel that deep down in your heart. There has always been only yourself. You have always been pretending. I lowered my head and our eyes met. So close that our breaths touched. The young man's face slowly turned from pink to red. Like a pressure cooker with a tightened valve. I choked up. Can you accompany me? Or? I leaned close to his ear and whispered. Give me a cooperation opportunity. 15. 16. I took 2 steps back, and almost burst out laughing in front of the young master. Howard's face was a mixture of expressions. It took him a long time to figure it out. His face was so gloomy that it seemed as if water could drip from it. Luna. The young man gritted his teeth and called my name. I responded with a smile. Watch less cheesy dramas. Young master. I waved my hand. Get some rest early. I'll pick you up and take you back to school tomorrow morning. Howard didn't speak and looked at me, grinding his teeth. I turned and walked out. Just as my hand was about to touch the doorknob, the person behind me suddenly moved. A faint smell of alcohol surrounded me. The young man's imposing body drew close to me. In the moment I was distracted. A well-defined hand passed through my waist and landed on the lock. Click. Oops. I went too far. The back of my neck was gently bitten by someone's teeth, as if to vent anger, leaving a slightly itchy tooth mark. Luna. Howard's voice was a bit hoarse, containing some indescribable meaning. It seemed like anger and indulgence at the same time. Another hand landed on my waist. You. I was pulled into a burning embrace. The young man's voice fell by my ear, with a hint of gritted teeth. Whether you want me or a cooperation opportunity, I'll give them all to you. There's only one condition. Tomorrow. Immediately kick your deadbeat husband. 17. Even a clay figure has a bit of temper. As I lay on the bed, my head, steamed by the heat, was in a daze and I thought. The moonlight by the bed fell. I curled my fingers, trying to grasp something, but someone with sharp eyes saw it and took the opportunity to squeeze into my fingers. Interlocking our fingers. The ringtone suddenly rang in the quiet night. I shook off the hand holding me and reached for my phone. A note on the screen made my muddled brain a bit clearer. Solomon. My husband finally seemed to remember that today is my birthday. And up to now, I haven't gone home yet. Just as I was about to throw it aside, Howard pressed the answer button first. Solomon's voice suddenly appeared. Luna? Why haven't you come home yet? Go home your ass. I answered in my heart. The naughty jerk secretly exerted force and scattered the words in my mouth. The good-for-nothing was extremely sensitive in this regard. Luna, what are you doing? Just as I was about to speak, Howard suddenly pressed the end call button. Solomon's roar came to an abrupt halt. I looked up at Howard. The young man lowered his head. I covered his mouth with one hand. Judging from the condition you offered, I thought. Such a classic plot. TSK. I curved my eyes. Young master. I didn't expect you to be a cuckold. I was bitten on the palm. Howard broke free from my hand and bit my shoulder. Luna. The young master's tone was gloomy. I'm a pure love advocate. 18. Sometimes it's a mistake that young people have too much energy. When I got up, the young master was still sleeping, clinging to me like an octopus. I removed his hand and got out of bed quietly. There were more than 40 missed calls on my phone. From Solomon. When driving past the mall, I thought for a while, and stopped the car. It was almost noon when I got home. When I opened the door, I saw Solomon leaning against the sofa in the living room. His clothes and hair were a bit messy. There was also his phone by his hand. There was also a cake on the coffee table. I walked over and reached out to smooth his hair. But suddenly I was grabbed. Solomon opened his eyes, which were full of bloodshot. Luna. His tone was a bit angry. Where did you go last night? Who were you with? He paused for a moment, suddenly realizing something, and then touched my hand. Where's the ring? Luna. Where's your ring? It was taken off by a certain young master. I pursed my lips, pulled back my hand, and smiled at Solomon. I brought you a gift. Facing Solomon's puzzled gaze, I took out a hat from the paper bag from the mall. A bright green, shiny green hat. Tada! I placed the hat steadily on Solomon's head, and took 2 steps back to admire it. It suits you very well. I have unique vision. No wonder it's me. Solomon seemed on the verge of fainting from anger. He reached out, and threw his hat on the ground forcefully. We are all smart people. Solomon looked at me, his eyes heavy. Who is it? Are you going to cause trouble for him? For the sake of our marriage, I advise you not to. Even if you want to cause trouble for him, he won't be in too much trouble. Who is it? Solomon was relentless. I smiled. Howard. The title of the crown prince is very resounding. It stunned Solomon for a moment. When he came to his senses, he grabbed my hand. Luna. Are you lying to me? Right? Does he not believe that the crown prince is interested in a married woman? Or does he not believe that I would betray our marriage? I smiled and took out a document from my bag and threw it in front of him. Divorce agreement. The document has been drafted for a long time. I have also been waiting for a long time. Blair is still useless. I sat down opposite him. Take a look. The property division is very simple. Yours is yours. Mine is mine. I won't take advantage of you. I hope you can sign it today. The sooner we get divorced, the better. Solomon didn't move. Luna. We don't have to get divorced. If you mind Blair, I can let her. Solomon. I interrupted his words. Looking listless. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm informing you. If there is a problem with the contract, we can improve it again. But divorce is certain. Luna. I won't. Thinking of our marriage. I think we don't need to go to this extent. I looked at him and uttered a word. Financial statement fraud. Solomon's expression changed immediately. Mr. Solomon. I smiled. You don't want the media to know about this. Do you? 19 Solomon took the divorce agreement when he went to the company. I know that this matter is basically almost certain. When I had free time to look at my phone, I found that I had been bombarded with text messages again. Where are you? Have you gone to the company? Are you busy? Is there any urgent matter? Why did you leave so early? Why didn't you call me when you left? I want to have breakfast with you. Are you going to renege on your promise? Crying kid head. JPG. I took a picture of the green hat on the ground and sent it over. I went to give a gift early in the morning. The crown prince. Awesome. 20 Solomon's company has a serious shortage of funds. An executive has transferred a large amount of funds. Once such a thing is exposed, his company is in jeopardy. Although old enterprises have their background, they can't withstand his nepotism. That executive is more or less related to Solomon. He doesn't dare to hand the person over. He can only think of ways to make up for that shortfall in secret. I'm afraid that if Solomon is in a hurry, he will drag me down without caring about his reputation. During the cooling off period for divorce, I still live at home and go to work as usual every day. But in order to annoy me, Solomon brought Blair back. The two of them are affectionate with each other at home every day. Occasionally, my gaze will fall on Blair's lower abdomen. After more than a month, nothing can be seen yet. Blair will dodge when she meets my gaze. I know she still doesn't dare to tell Solomon. On the day when the period expires, it is a sunny day. I took Solomon's car to the Civil Affairs Bureau. In those dozen or so seconds when waiting for the red light, the atmosphere in the car was so quiet that it was a bit depressing. Solomon suddenly spoke. There was no confrontation or sarcasm. Luna, if I didn't find someone from the very beginning, Would we? Could we have gone on forever? In fact, Solomon and I once had a period that could be called happy. Perhaps it was 3 months. Or maybe even less. I can't remember clearly. Since the first woman, there have been constantly beautiful women around him. The first time I bumped into him, after he woke up drunk, he smiled at me. Still gentle. Luna, he said, I hope you won't say anything that spoils my mood. I looked at him and smiled, suppressing the slight restlessness in my heart. I didn't ask who that woman was. Nor did I ask why he did this. I just said, don't drink too much. It's not good for your health. Probably people are always prone to reminiscing when they are about to lose. It's not really regretting the past. If he could do it all over again, he would still make the same choice. I didn't answer. 21 the moment I got the red book. My heart was completely at ease. When I walked out the door, Solomon paused for a moment. Luna. Yes. I suddenly spoke. Solomon was stunned. I looked at him with a smile. Yes. If you hadn't looked for someone else. If it had always been just the two of us together. We would have grown old together. Perhaps we would have had a clever daughter who would inherit our company. We could be hands-off bosses and travel the world together. Perhaps in the end, when we are old and feeble, we would look at each other, calmly making a promise for the next life. I took a step forward, my eyes curving. I reached out and touched Solomon's tie. Just like when we were first married. I tied his tie for him. Solomon's expression was slightly touched. Luna. But you won't. I took a step back, avoiding his hand that wanted to touch me, and looked at him coldly. You won't. Solomon. I know you are hypocritical, selfish, conceited, promiscuous, irresponsible, and high-sounding. His face darkened little by little. I know you too well. Solomon. That's why I married you. I smiled. Rejoice. As soon as we divorce, you discover the true vicious and cold-blooded nature of your ex-wife. Solomon took a step forward and reached out to brush the hair by my cheek. His tone was gloomy. Luna. He said. People like you will never gain the true hearts of others. The former lover lowered his head and murmured, uttering the most malicious curse in the most affectionate tone. But who cares? Losing love is like a fish losing a bicycle. Suddenly, a harsh honking sound rang out on the roadway. I turned around and the young master was sitting in the supercar with a displeased expression. I took a step back and waved at him, sincerely bidding farewell. Goodbye. 20 to seeing me come in. Howard leaned over to fasten my seat belt. The young man stiffened his neck and didn't look at me at all. I bit his face. The young master was startled and almost hit his head on the roof, his earlobes turning red. You. Imitating you. I smiled. Jealous? The young master's tone was sour. You're divorced. Yet you still tie his tie. I kissed his face. Don't worry. There's no love left long ago. Howard looked up, looking at me eagerly. Like a little dog, who is sulking secretly but especially likes humans. I took out my phone and called Solomon's old rival. Since I promised Solomon not to tell the media, then whether others tell the media or not is beyond my control. 23 The news of Solomon's company was exposed, and rumors of the company's decline were rife. Solomon was extremely busy but refused to admit it to death. It wasn't until one afternoon when Asher knocked on the door of my office. She had a look of joy on her face. General Manager Luna. Their company has issued new shares. The fish has taken the bait. 20 For people who don't want to see each other again, don't bid farewell when they part. Solomon's company survived the first general meeting of shareholders amid public opinion. The company's conference room is clean and bright. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, one can see the people in a hurry below at a glance. I admired the beautiful scenery for a while and sighed deeply. The world is really a huge pancake fruit. The young master who insisted on coming along while wearing a mask and hat. I'll buy one later. Footsteps came from outside. The shareholders entered in a hurry. when the last footsteps sounded in the corridor. So familiar. Just like many years ago when we weren't married yet, and when he heard that I had come to look for him at the company. That person was also like this. Hurrying along. The secretary outside the door said softly, "General Manager Solomon. The person sitting in the main seat is the largest shareholder. This time they bought." The pulley of the swivel chair turned, making an almost inaudible sound on the thick carpet. I turned around, put my hands on the conference table, and looked at Solomon with a smile, looking completely at ease. "Long time no see. Solomon. I didn't expect us to see each other again so soon." Solomon's expression almost cracked. 25 when we shook hands. He used almost 90% of his strength. And I didn't hold back either. My newly done manicure gave him a hard time. The meeting didn't go so smoothly because I was dedicated to finding faults with Solomon. It's not my fault. There are really too many loopholes in his company. Several times. Solomon almost couldn't maintain his expression when facing my questioning. The darker his face got, the better my mood became. When the meeting ended and the shareholders left one after another, someone wanted to exchange a few words with me, but Solomon intercepted them halfway. The man's tall figure blocked me. Solomon lowered his eyes. His gaze was deep, and his face was so dark that it could drip water. "Luna, you are really..." He ground his teeth. "Despicable and shameless." I stopped the young master behind me who was ready to act. I calmly patted the non-existent dust on Solomon's shoulder and said in a reprobative tone, "Solomon, this is your fault. How can business matters be called despicable and shameless? You can't hold on to the company." I looked at him and smiled, but there was a certain coldness in my eyes. "Then don't blame others. The business world is inherently ruthless, surrounded by wolves. Who knows who will bite whom in the back the moment they see a piece of fat? As I've said, I am a businessman." 26 When I left Solomon Company and sat down in the car, I suddenly caught a familiar figure at the gate. My hand was held. The young master took off his hat, and the broken hair on his forehead was slightly messy. He lowered his eyes, took a disinfectant wipe, and wiped my hand little by little, gently brushed over every inch of my fingertips. Outside the car window, the beauty was in tears like a pear blossom in the rain. It was stopped at the gate by the security guards. Blair was much haggard. Even so, there was an almost broken beauty. "Please, let me in. I just want to say a few words to the general manager of Solomon. I won't take long. Please." That beautiful face was full of tears. But the security guards were unmoved. "Miss, we can't let you in without permission. Please let me in and see him." Blair followed their movements, and was almost about to kneel down. Suddenly, the censored opened, and Solomon stepped out. His expression gloomy. Blair's movements froze. Immediately, she got up and threw herself at him. "Solomon! Solomon! Why won't you see me? Did I do something wrong?" The security guards reacted and immediately went to block her. "Miss, don't be like this." Solomon stood there. His eyes swept across her face, unmoved. "Next time, I don't want to see her at the company gate again." "Solomon, you can't do this." Blair gritted her teeth. "I'm pregnant with your child." Solomon's expression remained unchanged. "If you're pregnant, have an abortion. Of course. If you want to be a single mother, it's up to you." Blair seemed to have her last ounce of strength drained. She didn't struggle anymore but stared blankly as Solomon got into the car, leaving her alone, in a state of despair. I watched this farce to the end and closed the car window. "Let's go." 27 The car stopped at the company gate. I reached out to unbuckle my seat belt, but my hand was pressed down. Someone leaned over and covered my lips, with a kind of tenderness that couldn't be dodged. The pressed hand was instead held in the palm. A ring with body temperature encircled my ring finger, firmly fastened on my hand. When we separated, the young master's earlobe was like a jade of rosy powder. I spread out my hand and admired it, and found that it was a pair of wedding rings. Declaring sovereignty? The young master blushed like a child guarding his candy. You can't let me follow you without a proper status. I turned my head to admire his beauty and smiled. Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that I will look for someone else? Young master. My voice was gentle. Businessmen value profit and are indifferent to parting. Howard looked into my eyes. Unflinching. In his eyes, a small me was reflected. He laughed and calmly countered. Will you? Hard to say. My moral bottom line has always been flexible. It rises when faced with high standards and lowers when faced with low ones. Then what should we do? The young master said in a low voice, seemingly distressed. Fortunately, I have a lot of money. I was almost amused. My eyes curved. The young man's hand was held by me. On his jade-like knuckles, the pair of wedding rings identical to mine sparkled. I lowered my head. Kissed that ring. Then I will repay you with my body. Epilogue. Dog knows when Howard was in the second year of junior high school, and was pulled by a friend to watch a high school competition. The women's 800-meter final was in full swing, and a circle of people at the finish line were chattering. His friend took him and squeezed into the front row. Amidst the deafening cheers, one name was particularly prominent. Luna. Howard raised an eyebrow and asked his friend, "Who is Luna?" His friend pointed at the girl running in the front. "Look. It's her. You don't even know her?" Howard countered. "Do I have to know her?" His friend touched his nose. "Not necessarily. It's just that she is very famous in school. She is always in the top 3 in grades. She is also in the school student council. She is beautiful, and is said to be very nice." Howard was non-committal. The shouts around grew louder and louder. The girl running in the front was getting closer and closer to the finish line. Howard looked up and met the girl's smiling eyes in the sunlight. The ponytail at the back of her head swayed. Luna's face was flushed because of the heat. A kind of fruit subconsciously popped into Howard's head. After a moment of stunned hesitation, the young girl broke through the finish line. Amidst the deafening cheers, she couldn't restrain the speed of her feet in time, and directly crashed into the person in front. Howard instinctively reached out, knocked down by a force. But fortunately, the precious champion of the 800-meter race was caught firmly in his arms. The warm and soft touch on his chest was more sensitive than the pain of a scraped elbow. At the moment Howard's body temperature rose, there was only one thought in his head. It was the fragrance of camellias. 2. Howard seldom dreams. His sleep quality has always been very good. So when he woke up with a start from his bed, he was almost scared into a cold sweat. The content of the dream was not terrifying. In fact, it could even be called charming. For the first time, the teenager's wild thoughts touched the edge of adolescence. In the dream, the girl just held his hand and walked slowly on the path in the park. In the second before being awakened, the girl smiled and burrowed into his arms, looking up and gently kissing his dimple. The sunlight leaking through the layers of leaves quietly fell on her face. With a beautiful forehead and moth-like eyebrows, a charming smile and beautiful eyes, it was Luna's face. The consequence of physiology entering adolescence one step ahead of the spirit is that when he wakes up, he will see the already raised flag, standing straight and greeting him. Howard covered his face with his hand and berated himself for being dirty, filthy, and vulgar. Although the century-old family with a long heritage cannot be considered a scholarly family, at least it can be praised as having an upright family style. The young master, surrounded by gold and jade and full of high spirits, despised himself extremely for the first time. 3. At the age of 21, Howard was tricked by his fair-weather friends to an entertainment place. When he saw the group of beautiful girls huddled in the private room, he realized that he had been tricked. His friends sat on one side watching the show. The girls swarmed up and blocked all his escape routes. Howard stood in the circle with his ears buzzing, feeling that his head was only one step away from exploding, mainly because he was angry with his fair-weather friends. After finally finding an excuse to sneak away to the bathroom, Howard was calling his friend in the corridor. Before the call was connected, he was stopped by a girl who confessed her love. 20 years of self-cultivation made him suppress the anger in his heart and politely refuse. The young and beautiful girl covered her face and fled. His buddy spoke gloating lie on the other end. There are a few more who just went out to look for you. If you do this kind of thing again next time, you're done, Howard said lightly. The person on the other end finally realized that the young master's mood was extremely bad and soft, and his tone to apologize and soothe his good brother's mood. Howard didn't hang up the phone and listen to the person on the other end confessing. But his waist was suddenly encircled from behind. The fragrance of camellias spread from behind, vividly arousing all the senses of the young man. The voice falling by his ear carried some dust of time. But it was as familiar as an old friend who had just talked yesterday. The young master's adrenaline soared, as if two muscular giants, 1.9 meters tall, were beating drums crazily in his heart. The person behind him spoke with a smile in his tone, breathing softly by his ear. Young master, I'm different from those women. I'm a married woman. The long-dormant little deer almost crashed and died in his heart. 4. The young master lacks experience. But fortunately, he is young, full of enthusiasm, and has inexhaustible energy and brute force. There is also the surging love, possessiveness, and a little bit of dark jealousy that finally breaks through the floodgates, under the oppression of ethics and worldly morality. Howard lowered his head. Plum blossoms bloomed one after another on the snow. All the way down, the room was not lit. Only the intertwined gasps of the two people were deafening in the quiet night. Suddenly, his face was cupped. Howard looked up. Luna's hair was scattered on the white sheet. The moonlight outside the window fell into her eyes, and physiological tears moistened her eyelashes. The eyes filled with moonlight were like washed gems, with flowing glances, shining brightly in the dim room. Luna looked into his eyes and smiled with her eyes. Are you a dog? Howard inappropriately remembered the innocent nursery rhyme he learned in his pure and innocent childhood. A group of little painters came in the snow. Little chicks draw bamboo leaves. Little dogs draw plum blossoms. Little dogs draw plum blossoms. A very slight laugh escaped from the young man's throat. He lowered his head and a kiss fell between her eyebrows, bringing a trace of ticklishness. The fragrance of camellias filled the tip of his nose. She asked teasingly. Howard answered seriously. It's possible. The end. The end. The end. The end. The end. The end.